Hello, my name is Jared Carter. I'm the Education Coordinator at Waterworks Center for Environmental Education. Every year we teach 1,000 students about how important wetlands are to our environment. Hey Nico, thanks for joining us today, and we're going to be talking about wetlands. So, do you know anything about a wetland? Do you know what it is?
Well, obviously it has to be something wet and a lot of gunk.
Sure, it is a lot of gunk. So, definition, a wetland is an area of land where, like you said, like the soil stays wet for most of the year. And so we're going to talk about how important wetlands are to our environment and what kind of role they play. So first I want to let you see some of the plants that are actually grown in wetlands. These actually came from our facility. And so this type right here got long stems. This is a yellow flag iris.
Is it growing in rocks?
So it is growing in rocks. So we have mostly rocks in our pit, but as you can see down deeper, it holds a lot of water. So even if it's growing in rocks, it still has a lot of nutrients and it still has a lot of water. So we're going to move on to this one now. This is a canna lily, and all of these bloom eventually late spring, early summer, and they all have colorful blooms. And this one right here is called a lizard's tail. When it blooms, the name lizard's tail comes from its bloom, which is a white fluffy stem or flower that actually tapers off of the end, and it looks like a lizard's tail.
That's cool.
So when you see a wetland, you see a lot of different types of plants. In our wetland area, this one is actually in the water. So you can kind of see in the soil right here, the water level is very deep, and so that's why it has a long stem to get out of the water. Did you know that there are a few types of different types of wetlands? Have you ever heard of a swamp?
Yes.
A swamp is a wetland.
Would this grow in a swamp?
It could grow in a swamp, but when you hear swamp, what do you think of?
I think of very bad water and few trees.
Okay, trees, exactly. So what sets a swamp apart from other wetlands are actually trees that grow in this type of wetland. The next type is a marsh, and a marsh is more grassy. So it has a lot of grasses in it, but no trees in it. And then the other type is a bog, which you see a lot of moss and thick peat soil. And that, some grasses, not very many trees, and so that's a different type. Mostly in Alabama, especially in North Alabama, we have a lot of swamps. So I want to talk about what wetlands do. So here I have an experiment for us to do. Wetlands are like sponges in that the soil absorbs a lot of water. So what I would like you to do is pour this into our wetland demonstration and see how much water this wetland absorbs. And whenever we are being scientists, we like to measure. All right, so we actually dump 10 ounces of water into this wetland. So we have the soil up here, which is really Play-Doh. So if you want to do this at home, we use Play-Doh, and then we use sponges like you can buy at a grocery store. As you can kind of see, there's a little bit of water that made it to the end. This is like if a wetland was on the edge of a lake or a river, and that water moves through that wetland, it would end up in some kind of body of water like this puddle shows. But let's find out how much water this wetland absorbs. So if you will, squeeze those sponges into this jar. So squeeze those last two, and we'll just take a look at how much water we have.
Almost half full.
Okay, so this tells us, so we started out with 10 ounces right here. We have about 6 ounces that were squeezed out of those sponges. That means 60% of that water that we poured out was absorbed by the soil. And that's what wetlands do. They absorb a high percentage of the water that comes through them.
So is that what plants basically do?
So yeah, so the plants, imagine the plants are like holders or anchors of the soil. They make sure that the soil doesn't wash away. So let's take a look at it. So this soil right here, we actually took out of our wetland center in Hartselle.
Oh.
So if you would like to dump that out as best you can, you may have to use your fingers to kind of get it out. So there's a little bit of water coming out.
That's a lot of water. And it stinks.
There we go. It does stink. Yes, it does stink. But you can see, so even when we deal with something in real life, this is real life wetland soil, you can see how much soil just that one handful holds. So that one handful of wetland soil looks like it holds about 6 ounces of water. So we talked about how wetlands are like sponges. Now I want to talk about how wetlands are like filters.
Yeah.
So there are different types of pollution. Water runs off of a farm or a construction site. A lot of dirt comes off with it. Plastic, a lot of paper, a lot of trash on the side of the road, that also makes its way into our water. And then we have oil. So that's like car oil and gasoline and stuff that washes off with the parking lots and the pavements into our water. So yeah, just kind of swish that around a little bit. And we're gonna see if our little demonstration filter here gets that clean, because wetlands are like filters. The Everglades is this large area, but it filters the water, and most of the water that comes on the other side of the Everglades is clean. So as that water moves through, all those plants are removing the fertilizer, the dirt, the oil, the litter, and all the pollution you can imagine. If you would, pour that into this filter and we'll see how clean it comes.
Oh my gosh. Wow. It's coming out pretty clean.
It is, and so we won't filter the whole jar, but this little bit shows you that not only is the dirt and stuff coming out and the litter is coming out and being filtered out, but also the oil is as well. And so wetlands are not a perfect filtration system, so there's gonna be some stuff that gets by, but it cleans a high percentage of those pollutants. And that's how wetlands are like filters. They clean the pollution out of our waters. Now, unfortunately, what we've seen in our nation is that we like to build houses, we like to build buildings and malls and stuff like that. Sometimes those are built on top of wetlands. Sometimes wetlands are destroyed in order for us to build stuff. So you can imagine, out of the things that we've done so far, if you removed a wetland, what happens? You remove the sponge, right? The sponge is no longer absorbing the water. And you remove the filter, so the wetlands are no longer filtering the water and the pollution, so more pollution is getting into the system and more water is running straight into the surface waters like lakes and streams and rivers.
So we're losing water.
We're losing clean water because of that.
Oh,
so
that's even worse.
And we have lost about 85% of our wetlands in the U.S.
Oh my gosh.
But there's good news. All right, so what I want you to do sometime, especially in Madison County, is visit your local wetland, because you have a lot of wetland in your area, especially in the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge. Our third, what a wetland is like, and a wetland is actually like a nursery. So a nursery is a place that has a lot of babies, and they make sure that the babies are healthy, the babies are safe. When we talk about a wetland, I want you to know that wetlands have a lot of wildlife, and not only wildlife, but young wildlife. Fish like bass and pike and all kinds of other fish go to lay their eggs. Those eggs hatch, and they live their first stages of life in that wetland area. Wetlands are like nurseries. Wetlands are just crammed with food. So wetlands are a haven for migratory birds, because, like you said, if we have a lot of wildlife, there must be a lot of food. So that means wetlands are like a buffet. So when we go to a buffet, we like to have a choice, don't we? We have to like a selection of bread and meat and desserts. That also exists as a wetlands, but a little bit different. So birds, like migratory birds, they like to eat the plants. They like to eat the grains, they like to eat the seeds, but they also like to eat insects and worms, which are very plentiful because, like we go back to the nursery, it's also a nursery for insect larvae. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about how important wetlands are to our area. And so I challenge you to visit and find your local wetland area, and in Madison County, they're easy to find in the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge.
Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.